Let's see if it works. Hey, that was fast. It sure helps whenever you have the ultra low latency on. Okay, so everybody, this is the what do we call it again? Pedantic pen and
What do
paper
we call
podcast.
it? Jesus.
Pedantic pen and paper podcast. So this is Aaron speaking, and I have Chelsey with me.
Hello.
And we have a very special guest tonight, James Streissand, also known as Ash of Creativity.
Hi there.
So we have a fight to carry on, my friend. We have a fight. So let's just go right to it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to start with, and this is probably going to be what I would call a classic puss out move, is to say that there's probably a good sense of framing that could be the issue here in our perceptions. But I'm of the opinion that the Ranger class in 5th edition is not terrible, which is, counter to probably, I would say, 90% of popular opinion. And you are of the opinion that it is flawed enough to require not only the UA revision, but also something more.
Yes, I think that's a pretty fair. I think that's a pretty fair statement of our positions.
All right, so let's hear your case, because I'm like I kind of want to hear where you're coming from, because I have the feeling that there's probably going to be some similar thought in mind. I think that my problem is going to be more on the lack of support in the rule system itself rather than the class as it's written. So I'm curious where you're at on it.
Okay, so there's a few different angles that we could attack this from. I was not expecting to go first, which is fine, because I need to. Because I mean, why not, right?
Right.
So, how do we put this?
Well, if you want
when
me to,
we're looking,
oh, go ahead.
What's up?
I was just gonna say, if you want me to, I can just give my spiel real quick.
Yeah, that'll be preferable.
All right.
Because that'll let me know where to prioritize, what order I'm doing this in.
You'll know exactly how to tell you you're wrong.
Exactly.
But real quick, I have no stake in this argument. I have no idea what we're talking about.
Chelsey is not a mechanically inclined player.
I'm a neutral party here.
Yeah, she enjoys the fluff in the act of playing, but isn't really so concerned on mechanics. So my position is basically that a lot of people misunderstand what the Ranger is supposed to be, first off. Basically, I hear from a lot of people they're supposed to be ultimate archers or something to that effect, and I would say, no, a fighter with a bow is supposed to be the ultimate archer, because the fighter is supposed to be the best at fighting in like just across the board. Unfortunately, it doesn't really play like that in a lot of ways, because there are other classes that end up outshining the fighter in certain aspects. That's one of the many bones to pick I have with 5th edition. But so to me, I look at the Ranger as more of a hybrid class. I think that the design kind of supports that with the fact that they are half-casters, I believe.
They are half-casters,
right,
yes.
Right. And the fact that basically they are meant to be the exploration experts. So I think once you kind of like bring it in that direction, what you start to see is probably the biggest flaws might be if the party is going through several different types of environments. Then you're going to start having problems, because of course you start out with just like one favored terrain, and like you just get like one favored foe. So I mean, it is kind of small, but at the same time, most of the campaigns, well, I guess most of the campaigns that I would partake in, they're going to have like one major biome that they deal with, and so it isn't going to be that enormous of a problem. And to the credit of the design, I feel like getting advantage on all of these roles while you're in that particular terrain is very generous, especially if you have a campaign that's well suited for that kind of thing. So it's kind of to me, the biggest problem with the Ranger is more just the lack of support, because 5th edition doesn't really give you anything with exploration. It's just, from what I recall, they have like a travel speed. They have, like do a survival check to make sure you're not lost. And, like you might consume food. And that's pretty much it. And, the fact that that's how it is in the DMG to me is appalling. But to me, I don't see that as a shortcoming of the Ranger. I see that as a shortcoming of the edition in general. So let's hear your side.
Can I just throw in, I can tell already that we're not going to agree.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a few different angles that we need to approach this from. One is taking the system on its own and acknowledging what it is that the system says it's supposed to do, not by virtue of its rule book, but by how it plays at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regards, 5th edition is a combat game. It is not an exploration game. Most, if not all, of the abilities are centered on combat. Any of the other abilities do not center on any other given mode of play whatsoever. They are sort of spread out and random. They are called out as being ribbon abilities by the designers, where they're not supposed to have really any impact on a wider mode of play. It's just that they do, and it's not like they have to be structured that way. If a storm sorcerer has the ability to adjust rain and the speed of the wind in a certain direction, while they're with whatever action it is that they have to use in order to do that, there's no reason that couldn't impact the sails of a ship and have an impact in an exploration system.
Mm-hmm.
But the game doesn't have an exploration system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's exactly what they say it is. It's a ribbon ability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I guess that's kind of why I was reluctant to admit that that does kind of make the thing fall flat. I was very excited. Well, sort of. I was very excited whenever I saw that they are doing a wilderness kit for 5th edition, because basically one of the things that it was pitched, that was included, was mention of actual wilderness survival rules that would be part of the this new
Tasha's Cauldron to everything?
No, this is actually something separate.
It's something separate. Okay.
Yeah, it's called like the.
I'm wondering how they're going to package whatever they've stolen from myself, the Angry GM, and about 30 other independent designers.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a good bit of that. But yeah, I think it's just called the Wilderness Survival Kit. It's basically, it has a new GM screen. It has a like some new handouts that have just like new rules and things like that. And there's like some tokens and maybe even cards. I don't know. There's quite a bit to it.
Turning it some method of some kind of accoutrements for, and I've almost certainly butchered that actually. But some sort of trimmings or trappings for the GM to use and turn it into an actual mode of play.
Yes. And
which would be very obviously distinct from what we have in the game at current, which is a few lines about water, rations, traveling speed, of which there are only 3. I'm not sure if there are rules on weather. There might be rules on weather and how they impact the game, but they are minimal.
Yeah, I
don't think
there are. I don't think there are. I think there's basically in the DMG, I believe that they have like tables for determining what the weather might be. Possibly that might be something that's in there. But as far as what effects that might have, I think that a lot of what they try to do is they just try to pin it on, advantage, disadvantage. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that's the second angle from which to attack the Ranger. When we're looking at the favored enemy features, even if we were to assume favorite enemy and favorite terrain, even if we were to assume that these were otherwise effective class features which were built for the system as is, rather than reverting the Ranger to an earlier state in its playtest for rules which did not age well or did not age at all, didn't make it into the game to begin with, which is, by the way, exactly what happened.
I didn't know that.
The version of the Ranger that we have was an earlier edition of the Ranger that was in I believe the D&D Next playtest. Because the D&D Next playtest was taking it in a certain direction and having a certain impact on it, and Wizards just said, nope, we're gonna revert it to this earlier state, and then they shipped it.
Interesting. That I feel like with the context of what happened with 4th edition, it kind of maybe makes sense that they did this, because it seems like they're not really willing to commit to the whole concept of exploration as a real pillar. Because obviously with 4th edition they just I don't care.
Right. Well, with 4th edition they just said it's a combat game, and I think that they were wrong insofar as D&D is a combat game, but it was a flag planting moment. They chose the wrong hill to die on, of course, but they produced an excellent combat game and an excellent action resolution system, which was far easier to engage with than 5th editions. Not by much, because 5th editions is actually, if 5th edition has one advantage, if you will, it will be the action resolution system. But when it came to 4th edition, it was even easier. It was even easier to cast a fireball because you only had to make one roll. You didn't have to worry about rolling saving throws for 20 different creatures.
Well, that's true.
So when we're looking at the favorite enemy and looking at the natural terrain features, even if we took those on their faces, they are made to engage with the system. They are made to interact with the system in a fashion that produces different outcomes that might otherwise occur within your game and actually have an impact on the game, and would in some way impact your player's choice on whether or not to go through one terrain versus another. Even if we took all of that for granted, what these features essentially give you is advantage on a check. And I do not view that as generous. It is trivially easy to get advantage on checks in 5th edition. 1 with the help action, 2 with the actions of spells. Mostly spells. And there are a few other class features that will interact with a help action mechanic in some fashion. But getting advantage broadly in 5th edition is fairly easy, provided somebody else in your party takes the action to do it. So I don't actually view that as being terribly helpful.
Yeah.
And given that typically in D20 systems, or not even just in D20 systems, people say that this is a staple of D20 systems specifically, and I don't think it's any system in which roll the high number is the goal. I don't care. Like, guess what? That's still Power to the Apocalypse. That's still all of your D10 systems, your D10s, your D6 systems. It's all of them. If your system is roll the high number, it's effectively the same when it comes to action resolution. I don't like, there is roll the high number, and then there is Genesis and Warhammer and all the Fantasy Flight game stuff. And probably some others out there like Burn Bright. But when you come to just rolling advantage, it's like, all right, well, I succeed on the wilderness survival, or I don't succeed on the wilderness survival. Even with that trivially easily accessible mechanic of advantage, it still doesn't even have an important outcome, really.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's not like you're rolling on a table and you're changing your results on that table.
That's true. Well, I feel like you got me, man.
There's one final, if that's the case, there's one final method to attack this from, which is that favorite enemy in natural terrain. In our first campaign, we had 2 Rangers. I was one of them. My buddy Caleb was another. I ended up multi-classing into Wizard down the line because I went to multi-class and other things that are not important or relevant. But we both chose Forest, actually he might have chosen Plains or Grassland, something which was adjacent to the terrain that we were starting in, which was Forest, and which is what I chose. And we both, I believe, chose humanoids for a favorite enemy. He might have chosen undead, but I believe I chose humanoid. I know for a fact I chose humanoids. I think he did as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we chose humanoids that we were going to come across. And we did come across those humanoids. We did go through the terrains that we had selected as per our Natural Explorer feature. And nothing happened. Nothing changed. Those skill checks were not put into play. And that is not merely a facet of, like, because there's this kind of shibboleth that's used in the 5e community when talking about the Ranger, which is used to immediately shut down discussion around it. It's like, well, you see, the problem with the Ranger, they'll lead up to it like, yes, I agree there's a problem, and then they'll very quickly clamp down on what that you're allowed to think that problem is, which is like, well, you just need, your DM has to give you an opportunity to interact with those enemies, or you just feel bad about it. That's where the problem with the Ranger is kind of held in. And that's simply not the case. It's that nothing, selecting a favorite enemy or not selecting a favorite enemy, has literally no impact on the game. You get a greater favorite enemy at 6th level as a Ranger, and what comes of that is effectively you get an extra language. Your Paladin friend gets an aura in which he adds his charisma modifier to the saving throws of himself and everybody else around him. And you are comparing these things side by side and saying, I feel as if I've been screwed over by the designers in some fashion.
Yeah.
And the Paladin is another, just to finish this thought up, the Paladin is another fantastic example of why it is that you don't need, if you have a feature that targets a specific enemy, you don't need to constantly include that enemy in order for your character to have fun or whatever, because both the Paladin and the Cleric have certain features which provide you with advantages against undead. And with the Paladin, it also includes that feature against demons. It's a Divine Smite feature. Now, the Paladin already gets to add 2d8 for just using a first level spell slot on that Divine Smite. What happens then is that the Paladin does not say, oh, this is terrible, I hate it, it's not fun that I'm getting this extra 2d8 radiant damage because I'm not also getting additional 1d8 for hitting a fiend or undead.
Right.
No, they like having it anyways, right? Because it's extra damage. It's just that they get a little extra bonus when it comes to fighting this other specific enemy. And that's kind of the final issue, the final trapping of the Ranger is the fact that no, the features are just not interesting to begin with. They're not fun to begin with, even if they have an impact.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten into the Beastmaster specifically, which seems to be where a lot of the ire lives.
Yeah. Would it surprise you if I said that sorry, that the Beastmaster is not really something I hate either?
It doesn't surprise me, actually.
Well, yeah, I feel like you made great points. I mean, I guess it's really just my my reluctance to let things as they're written bother me too much. But I mean, ultimately, that's the standard that we have to go by if we want to, draw comparisons. And if they want to act as if they care about this, then they really need to put in the work with the system to make sure that everything flourishes. So yeah, you got me there. Let's talk about your project.
Are we skipping? Did you have any additional comments on the Ranger or something like that?
Not
there might
really.
be.
Like I said, I think you kind of got me. Like and that's what I was trying to say is that I thought it was kind of like a framing thing, because a lot of times people, they tend to complain about just damage output, and damn it, like, because of the fact that I don't look at D&D as a combat game, damage output is just one of those things that I'm not overly concerned about. I do have like some quibbles here and there. Like I kind of like the older edition setup where you didn't have attack cantrips, so magic users needed to be more conservative with their spells. You had it kind of made like just just resource management was more of something that needed to be considered. All that kind of stuff. So that's it's hard for me to look at D&D and admit that it's basically become a combat game, within the last few iterations.
It's not a combat game though.
Well, it's not the way we play it. Now,
Right.
I did basically denounce 5th edition and
yet.
Wizards of the Coast, which I've been on the verge for some time. I've been very unhappy with what they just their treatment of almost everything in the last couple years that I've actually been paying attention. With the Mike Merles thing, just with everything, because you might think, oh, he's upset that they haven't fired Mike Merles. I'm upset that they haven't defended Mike Merles.
Hearing the name,
I will
Mike
happily
Merles.
co-sign that. No, go ahead.
Hearing the name Mike Merles triggers something dark inside me. It's like I'm already angry.
Yeah.
No, I'm not angry, but okay. So you said that you said it's not a combat, or I said it's not a combat game, and you said not the way we play. Okay, yeah, but I would say that it's not a combat game anyway. I think you said something about how it's not designed to be that way because the rules go in more for combat things or something like that.
Yeah.
Something along that vein. But I don't think so, because there are exploration rules too. Just a lot of people I feel like don't use them. I know they're not as prevalent, but they're there.
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the exploration rules in 5th edition, and then you compare it to the kind of stuff that they had in the AD&D, it's not even really close. I mean, and I'm not an AD&D scholar. I've played AD&D. I haven't run it, so. I haven't
I'm tempted to bust out my AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide.
Well, from what I've seen snippets here and there, and even in OD&D, whenever you read OD&D and you see Gygax writing about setting up how many monsters there are, basically it went to such extent that you would have, okay, here is a fortress of orcs. There are, 3,000, you roll them up. There's 3,000 of them. For every this many, they've got one, magic user. They've got 3, fighters, that kind of thing.
Fighters uses
yeah, settlement building.
Yeah. And, just there, there's that. I mean, telling you how to properly just set things up, even just something as minor as just weather effects and things like that are, important. Procedures for, foraging and for hunting and things like that, would be something, but really it's just it's just not there.
Well,
that's the thing. It's there are mechanics in the rule system for exploration about how and they mostly come down to make sure you eat and drink your food and water, and you won't take points of exhaustion.
Right.
That's basically it. Because I did an essay a few weeks ago. Yeah, it was a few weeks ago now about can't the GM just decide something, and I centered it around. Right, I centered that around a discussion I was having in my Discord about weather, and weather is one of those things where you might say that can't the GM just decide what the weather is and stuff? It's they can do that, but they in fact won't do that because it's not in the rule system, and if there's nobody with a feature that's dependent on the weather, and there's nobody who. And by and large, people do not think of the weather as being something that has an impact on their games. And it's not something that the weather does not suddenly increment into a supernatural thunderstorm or a supernatural waterspout or a sandstorm of some variety. But if you're assaulting a desert outpost, whether or not you do that under a clear sky or under the cover of a desert sandstorm, that actually changes the encounter quite a bit, even if you are purely engaging with a combat game. So
Yeah.
when we're looking at the exploration mechanics, they do not influence your game. And we actually do have examples of how exploration can impact your game, especially if you have other hooks in your system. Like if you have a component system where people need to discover or harvest or forage for components in the crafting of potions, magic items, even mundane and masterwork items, or it could be unique components in order to cast spells, or at least to cast spells with less risk in your game, like much like in my system. Or it could be that every time you cross a new hex, you have to roll an encounter chart, and it's not a random encounter, it's not a combat encounter chart.
Right.
Because I find those incredibly annoying, incredibly tedious, and those are the sorts of mechanics that people throw out very quickly. It's not like, oh, well, we're going to travel 7 days. It's like, well, time to roll 7 combat encounters. It's like, no, we just skip it so we could get to the other thing. It's like, well, what if it wasn't that? What if it was a matter of like, oh, you encounter, you find a party of dead adventurers. You find a shrine to a deity. You find a small supply cache. You find an alchemical reagent just sitting there waiting for you. You camp for the night, and you camp by a pond, and you find that pond is inhabited by a fae who may or may not want you there, or may provide you with a blessing, or may curse you, or charm you, or do something. These are modifiers on the game. They are a separate mode of play unto themselves. Whereas the 5th edition, there are exploration rules in there, but they are not a mode of play unto themselves. There are no features that really impact them or impact their outcomes. Except for the one of the Rangers, which is you don't get lost, and you basically don't have to worry about foraging for food and water.
Yeah.
The features present in the game eliminate the challenge from the sparse rules that we actually have, which is why I don't say that the game has an exploration focus. I think it has a combat focus. It's not just that you are forced to do combat in the system, but it's what the system actually supports. There are no role-playing mechanics, by and large. But that doesn't keep you from role-playing.
Right.
But the game would be very different if there were role-playing mechanics, and if part of your core character progressions, there were features which influence those role-playing mechanics.
No, Chelsey, you wanted to say something?
Oh no, it's fine. I realized I was wrong.
Oh.
It's a rare.
Oh,
occurrence,
shoot.
but it happens.
I do definitely feel a lot of anguish with all of the things that are built into the system that you can access that just say don't worry about it whenever it comes to things that ultimately I want as either a player or as a GM to have people worry about. That's one of the reasons why I desperately hate the Warlock class. It's because of certain invocations that they can get that basically say, I'm not going to worry about this thing.
Well, some have stated, I have stated that 5th edition just seems like baby's first D&D, which is probably why I like it. And it sounds like you just need a stronger, harder new drug to try.
Yeah,
like you've grown up past baby's first D&D.
I need heroin.
I will take a separate approach to that. I will plant my flag here and now and say that 5th edition is the 3.5 retirement home.
Ah, yes.
It was made for people fleeing the 3rd edition of the game, and by extension Pathfinder, who finally collapsed under the basically everything that they were hoping people would do when they first released 4th edition. And start, collapse under the weight of rules bloat in Pathfinder and in 3.5. But instead they didn't do that because people were not tired of 3.5 by then, and so 4th edition did not get the previous players of the game. What 4th edition did get was a whole host of new players who went in and said, wait, I've been playing World of Warcraft, I've been playing Diablo, I've been playing these computer RPGs, and you're telling me I can basically have every mod I wanted on that RPG and could come up with them on the fly. I just have to do it around the table. Fantastic. But those factions, people who wanted the lapsed 3.5 players and people who wanted to retain the advances that they'd made in 4th edition, were split on the design team. And you could probably guess along which lines they were split. And we all know which one won. It was the 3.5 retirement home team.
Well,
it was, and yeah, so it is a bit like Baby's first RPG. It has an expiration date. That expiration date is probably 2 campaigns before you get into supplements and stuff like that. And yeah.
I hope that that's the case, but I can only say from, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with, like my gaming history, but I'm pretty new. I've only been playing for about 3 years.
Okay.
But so for me, I guess it was probably about 2 campaigns for me. It's probably less. No. As far as like once I started, wanting the harder drugs.
Oh.
But because for me, I was a player in 1 campaign, and then about 3 months into that, I started DMing. And then after I started DMing my first campaign, I was like, there's a lot of things I don't like here. And then, that's just kind of how things progressed. But my experience has also been with the players that I have that, I was going to say most, but pretty much all of them, they have no real interest. Well, I take that back. I have had one player who seems to have had interest in kind of tinkering with rules a little bit. But for the most of them, basically, they want to play D&D. They want to use, what Wizards of the Coast puts out, whether it is official or UA. But whenever you're looking beyond that, indie, third party, whatever, like they don't really want to bother with it unless it's some kind of licensed property or just unique thing that is really big, So I've had some that have shown interest in Dragon Age RPG because they love Dragon Age the game. I've had, some that have played World of Darkness, just because that's an entirely different big thing that's pretty popular. And then I've had, oh God, now it's slipping my mind. I had somebody say that they played the Game of Thrones RPG. But outside of that, like it's been like pulling teeth, basically. Most of my success in finding people for OSR stuff or for anything that's very, much like a hack or anything like that has been, getting people off Reddit, just, people from all over the world where you have an enormous pool, that you can pull from. But as far as like the local stuff goes, it's just not really prominent.
Well, I can tell you what I like about 5th edition. Aside from
we don't talk good about 5th edition in this channel.
I'm trying to be the devil's advocate here. Something that I like, as a normie who isn't looking for a stronger drug. I like. Well, I'm just gonna come out and say it. I like the less complicatedness of it. But the reason for that isn't because I'm so much looking for less complicated. It's more that it feels like it's as opposed to the other ones, from what I understand, it feels like it's much more of a sandbox that gives you all kinds of materials to just live in your chaos. Like, just do what you want and have fun with it. And it's not as restrictive, and that's why it doesn't have as much strict rules and numbers and math on as many things as other editions do, from what I have heard. And I like that. I like that, you can just be out of the box and weird with it.
Yeah, so like you're trying to say it's just like it's easy to improvise.
Yeah, without people wanting to shove a rule book in your face, like,
yeah.
But you can't do this because this specifically says this in the rules. Like, it doesn't have as many of those hard rules, like hardcore. Like, every little thing is policed. It's like more of a, it's more of a. I hate to use the word easier, but it's easier, and it lets you be just a little bit more creative and, mix things up.
Majorly in contrast with 3rd edition.
Yeah, I wouldn't play 3rd edition.
Well, that's why I call it the 3.5 retirement home, because I'm going to let you in on a secret. 5th edition has a less easy to engage with action resolution system than 4th edition does. Because the basic concept is players do a thing, you decide whether or not that thing can succeed or fail. If somebody says, I go wash my hands, you don't have them roll for it unless you're stupid. And if somebody says, I jumped to the moon, you don't let them roll for it unless you're stupid.
Mm-hmm. I'd probably let somebody roll for it.
Well, that seems to be the general consensus.
That's why I like 5th edition, though. It's like I can get away with stupid shit like that.
Well, I mean, that's
well, you can listen. You could have somebody say, I want to jump to the moon in any edition. It will be just as big a waste of time in 5th edition as every other one. I can assure you, except maybe in 3.5, because 3.5, the point of it is tricking out numbers to go ridiculously high.
Right.
But like, when it comes to 4th edition, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I would enjoy the whole I'm gonna try to jump to the moon thing just for the sheer fact of, well, you can try, and I get to have fun coming up with what exactly is gonna happen when you try, because that's not gonna succeed. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just kind of
right. I mean, I know that's the approach that you take to situations in general, which is fine. When it comes to the ones that actually literally can't succeed, it's a lot less fun when it starts coming out of the table. Especially if you're not one of the players out there. It's like, I want to roll to skip this rock. It's like, stop. Hey, there are other people here.
Yeah.
There are other people here.
Yeah.
There are other people here. We have stuff to do. But then you go down the list and say, okay, well, if this doesn't succeed or automatically fail, is there a consequence for failure? You know, if this person goes up to the lock and they say, I want to pick the lock, does anything happen if they fail at picking the lock? And if your answer to that is no, then you also don't have them roll for it. But if there's a chance that failure has an immediate consequence, you say, okay, roll for it.
Right.
And that's the action resolution system, both for 4th edition and for 5th edition. The difference between 5th edition and other RPGs is that these other RPGs actually give you more material. If you're only playing 5th edition, you have these blinders on for what play encompasses. It feels like you could do anything, because within the play space that you're envisioning, there are no restrictions, in a sense, right? It feels like you can ask for anything, but you can't ask for, can I have a war? Can I build a castle? Can I craft an item? Can I research a spell? Can I tame an animal? Can I look for components and stuff like that? Once you start getting into these other modes of play, things actually get a little bit more. It starts becoming apparent that 5th edition does not have the support for them. Because usually, what you don't need is rules for, here's exactly what happens, and here's exactly what you have to roll when one creature is falling on top of another creature, and have somebody then shove that in your face. Right, because that's the thing that we want to avoid, because that's annoying. Those are the sorts of rules where they are not important. They are things that are, there's sort of 4 degrees of rules, which are things you have to memorize, 2 things you have to read, 3 things that are fun to memorize, and 4 things that are fun to read. And a specific rule on what happens when one creature falls onto another is in that fun to read category. You don't actually need that outside of the core action resolution mechanic. But you do need certain structural elements if you want to support a given mode of play. So combat adds initiative and hit points to help determine what's happening. What happens when you engage in combat and stuff like that.
Right.
If you're engaging with Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers rules, you have structural elements for here's how you turn gold into towns and cities and strongholds that provide you with mechanical bonuses. And furthermore, how to engage in a war. So that's not just like, you don't just say, I want to send my army against this army, and your DM kind of like throws up their hands because they don't know what to roll in that instance. Right. They don't know how many times to roll in that instance.
Yeah, it kind of expects you to just come up with it on the fly and basically write your own support for the system through play, I would imagine, or to just.
I don't think it even does that. I think I've said before that 5e is a mousetrap of sorts. I think it is designed to put blinders on you so that you do not try to engage with these other modes of play. So you don't try to do crafting, so you don't try to start a war, so you don't try to sail a ship. or build an airship, or build a kingdom, build a castle, take over, run for office or whatever.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I did feel a good bit of exasperation whenever I was trying to run games that were more open, and basically the mode of play that the players were pushing was basically just adventure site. Like it was basically they wanted a story path kind of thing, and I'm not a story guy. I'm a world guy. You live your life within the world, and you're able to do whatever you want. And what it tends to be for them is, I want to be the hero kind of thing. And that's never really been the thing that I've wanted to do with D&D. That might be something I want to do with like Marvel Phase Rip or something like that, but not D&D.
So here's the thing. And this is actually more relevant, perhaps, to video games in particular, but it does translate over to tabletop RPGs. Mm-hmm. Is that if your game has no structural elements, a cinematic or railroady, you could say, experience like playing Halo. Halo does not have mechanics for running a command and conquer style encounter against Covenant forces on a given planet. Mm-hmm. You go through corridors and you attack things and shoot things. Mm-hmm. And because the designers know you're going to go through these corridors, they just add certain set pieces within them because they know that you're going to engage with them and probably going to do it from a specific viewpoint and try to create a more cinematic storytelling experience.
Oh God, yes, I've experienced the set piece D&D from the side of the player, and I'm not a fan. I've never been a fan.
Yeah. Oh, it feels like you're playing through somebody's comic book, and right. I sit there and I say, I can just get you in touch with some artists, and we could stop wasting everybody's time. But I don't say that. Right. But I don't say that out loud. I don't say that out loud, but it's when it comes to when you don't have the access to this mechanics and you say, go out and do what you want. The players are like, well, like what? Mm-hmm. My two methods of advancement in this game are acquire levels, which is done by acquiring XP, which is done by killing things, or fighting things. I will give the designers a slight amount of credit for saying that you don't actually have to kill something in order to get its XP. You could just defeat it. Mm-hmm. And the other method is magic items, which are, quote unquote, supposed to be rare, which is 5th edition's way of saying, oh, well, we completely screwed up the math. And getting a +1 sword starts ruining the combat experience so that the GM has to begin an arms race. So we're just going to say that you don't get magic items that often because that makes them special, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, which is I think we had that argument. I think we had that argument as well about magic items. I want to say that was one that we had.
Probably. I mean, it certainly appeared on Twitter and stuff like that. And I have to argue with people who are talking about like, oh, well, don't you know basic economics and supply and demand? It's like, yes, like, okay, you could give me a rare shoe in D&D and it does nothing. It's not special because it's a shoe.
Right.
And the shoes do not make an impact on my game. Mm-hmm. Similarly, if you give me a crappy item and you do it at a later level, it does not change the experience by and large. You could say, well, now you get to go fight these creatures that were not immune to, or that were normally immune to your attacks and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I'm still just swinging my swords against creatures which are taking damage. Mm-hmm. So the experience, which is what we're trading in the specialness of, that's where the special lives, is in the difference of the experience, remains identical, which is why it's not special. Mm-hmm. What they're trying to do is they're trying to return to that time where, oh, I got my first magic item. And I felt really, really cool because this is my first magic item. So we got to return to that feeling. It's like, no. You don't get to ruin this for everybody else. You don't get to screw up the game for everybody else, but they did anyway. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Cass. Thanks, Cass. I really appreciate being told that, oh, well, you get a +1 magic sword at 5th level. And I think before that, like, screw you and stuff like that. No, No, it's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah. We did have a comment here that I neglected. My apologies. So my friend Florence, who is in my AD&D Saturday game, he basically said that he was lurking while working on some art, and I think he was riffing on what we were talking about with impossible roll checks. He says, "You go wash your hands, roll a d20, rolls a 1, you drown in the sink."
Yeah, that is the thing that you want to avoid.
Or do you?
I love
No, it is the thing that you want to avoid. Because the moment that I, as a player, do not know what to expect in a sense of like whether or not the world is not realistic, I think people try to dismiss all sorts of shit by saying, "Oh, well, that's not realistic," right? Or "Oh, you want realism in the elf game?"
Oh,
no, it's just grounded in a set of
evil.
expectations.
Yeah, I'm very much a verisimilitude kind of guy as well. Yeah, for me, the only time that kind of thing is going to happen is, well, I like fumbles in games that have fumbles integrated into them as an important part. Like Dungeon Crawl Classics, you know, I had a situation where we fumbled on a boat. Just like a little boat. We were being attacked by something. I can't remember. Well, actually, I do remember. It was crocodiles or alligators, one of the two. Because our wizard, our wizard, who was had a shield on us that was massively overcasted. Like we were protected for 24 hours. Like it was going to be a cakewalk the rest of the day. But she got critted by an alligator, so just devoured like instantly. And then we engaged in combat, and then one of us chainmail toting motherfuckers that didn't strip fumbled and fell out of the boat and started drowning. And it was just, honestly, I think he went a little easy on us. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but he's like, you can make a check to try and take your armor off, and I was like, well, I mean, really, we're dead. This person,
Right.
This person's
well,
dead.
That's an element where fumbles are kind of the right place for them.
Yeah.
Because you're engaging with you're not simulating real life, but you are simulating something. You're simulating the pulps. You're simulating Corrin and Corwin of Amber. Mm-hmm. You're simulating Prince Elric. You're simulating Jack of Shadows. You're simulating Cudgel the Clever, or Unpronounceable the Magician. Any of the Vance characters, really.
Yeah,
right?
I can definitely attest to the fact that fumbles happen. In that, the one time I did training with a company where I was doing door-to-door sales, they had me go with technicians into an attic. And of course, I would be the one that fell through somebody's ceiling. So they definitely do happen.
Yep, that'll happen.
So, did you want to talk about your game?
Well, we sort of did in a roundabout way.
Well, a little bit. I just kind of like wanted to know what the elevator pitch is. What inspired it. Just all that kind of stuff.
Well, spite.
Spite.
Spite. As is well known, I became a game designer out of spite. No, so I decided that I was trying to figure out. It started initially as just a project of, and I didn't know this at the time, but basically, it was me trying to figure out what was feeling unsatisfying about D&D 5th edition, where some of these things are not. Nope, give me one moment.
Okay. You know, spite is actually a really good motivator.
I was gonna say that's like the best motivation. All the best villains in history have been motivated by spite.
All right, you say you're back?
I am back.
All right.
Yeah, so when I was looking at the game, I was trying to figure out, all right, what is it that I hate about 5th edition, or at the time not hate, but was sort of gnawing at me.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I put this? It was just a cascade of things that I disliked hitting me as I started learning design on my own. Or not learning design, applying what I knew about design, because I've been studying this since I was like 13. It was just couched in the subject of video games.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back and forth and figuring out, like, okay, levels 1 and 2 of 5th edition are training levels. And every time we go through the training levels, I have a nagging suspicion that we're in the training levels and none of this stuff actually matters. And we can't go outside the bounds because we'll just die. And then we just got to restart things. So that's why I get angry. So once we get to where the action starts, my interest is already lagging well behind. And there's nothing in the game that actually lets me catch up. Why is there nothing in the game that lets me catch up? Well, the abilities are all spread out so much. Mm-hmm. And getting to a new level of spell doesn't really count because you're basically just casting bigger fireballs primarily. Well, is that all the spells in the game? No, it's not all the spells in the game. There are interesting control spells and stuff like that. Wait a minute. Why do I not like those? Oh, I see. It's because there's this trait. There's this trait that says if I cast one spell that has the trait, any other whatever other spell had that trait that I was currently concentrating on, its concentration, spoiler, goes away. Which means I have to rely on all these other people in a really implausible fashion to make myself feel like the Archmage, the big damn wizard. Mm-hmm. And why does that work the way it does? And 3.5 retirement home is the answer I eventually got to. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with game balance. It had nothing to do with game balance. There were any number of ways they could have fixed that problem, up to and including just having half of the concentration traits description in it, where it's just you take damage while you're concentrating on a spell. Well, there's a chance that spell that damage forces you to end concentration on the spell. Mm-hmm. And that would have been fine, but they had to overcorrect because people who were playing 3.5 were bitching about it. So now we have to ruin funds for everybody and screw anybody who's coming to the game new. Mm-hmm. And then going over like, multiclassing. Why does multiclassing work the way it does? Are you telling me that if I multiclass between spellcasters and stuff like that, I'm not able to start mixing and matching things? Like my spellcasting prowess as a wizard and studying the arcane has no impact. I have to start from square one at this level when it comes to using ranger spells and stuff like that. That doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And going through the multiclassing mechanics and revising those and saying, this is basically a half classless game. There are quote unquote classes, which are kind of just grouped by theme primarily. But you could just take features from any number of these things, and because it's a mechanical overlay. That's right. This is all your class features are a mechanical overlay for your character. They are not your character. This isn't Destiny, where there are titans and warlocks and hunters in the world, and they're all called titans and warlocks and hunters in the world, and we refer to them as titans and their warlocks and hunters and by their individual subclasses. Because we as writers at Bungie don't know how to distinguish our lore dumps from fan fiction, and stuff like that. It's like no. My barbarian cleric is not a barbarian cleric in the world. They are a savage berserker who is occasionally empowered by a deity to accomplish greater and greater feats, and occasionally has a smidgen of magical power that they can draw upon. Mm-hmm. That's what multiclassing is. But people don't understand that because the mechanics don't account for things, and they don't account for everything is automatically hand wave in the background if you do engage with this system. So how do I make that not hand wave in the background? What if I have mechanics for casting a spell when you don't know how to cast spells and trying it for the first time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What if that?
Sorry. Go ahead.
What if that? Sorry, just to finish this up, what if that played into different mechanics? What if there was a resource that made that more possible? What if resources were important in the game? What if components determined what you could do with spells? Mm-hmm. What if they also determined what you could do with crafting? What if there were places that you could do crafting at to make sure that you were better at crafting? What if those places needed to be defended? What if you wanted to expand those places? What if you wanted to run wars and armies and manage a kingdom? What if you wanted to engage in sailing and airships and stuff like that? And it was just a series of what ifs of everything that I wanted to do in the game but could not do because there was a wall set up somewhere in the system to keep me from doing it. And I said, nope, there should not be walls here. The game should support all of these things, especially in the year of our Lord 2020, which is where I'm at now. And everybody else listening to this, at least live. And yeah, it was basically just frustration with all the things that I could not do, and then deciding, what if I had a relatively coherent system that allowed me to engage with any fantasy within the fantasy genre, provided it was couched within this one given context, and saying, what if your players were lords? And what if they acted as lords do, and could do as lords wanted to do, and were similarly powerful in universe, and spiraling off from there?
Interesting. Yeah, so you're kind of singing to the choir a little bit, because like that is, as far as the classes just being mechanical overlays, that is something that I hadn't really found the words for, but it was something that, I had, a lot of times people, whenever you say, I want to do a classless game, they just kind of tune out immediately for some reason. Yet it was something that I was kind of like, well, that seems like a really interesting way of approaching it, because of the fact that I'm not really satisfied with multiclassing as a concept. I feel like the way, well, for one, the execution I feel like is kind of poor, but secondly, it's also just like from a conceptual level, I kind of have a hard time with it, but I have a lot easier of a time saying, well, I'm going to start, learning this kind of mode of existence, I guess, so kind of like how you were describing with the savage who, has the occasional help from a deity kind of concept, that flows to me a lot more than, just kind of smashing a little bit of cleric into my barbarian.
Right. And that's the benefit of having done this work in advance and stuff like that, is you can say, well, what's the issue that people have with classless systems is that they typically get a little bit nervous. Like if you look at the skill list of GURPS, you're going to get freaked out for a moment. But if these features are kind of grouped together, then you're going to have, a much easier time where you think of it as, well, I am playing this class. I just occasionally maybe dip if I want to. And then once you have them hooked on the system and they iterate on the campaigns going forward, then things change in a positive fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So whenever you say that they the players are basically going to play as lords, you mean like within a feudal context, or like medieval context rather, or just they're like nobility, or
sort of. I mean, I just take the assumption that they are powerful people engaging with forces beyond normal people. Like sort of, yeah, yes plus. Mm-hmm. Yes plus and minus. Yes with a yes with the target spread of how accurate that is. Generally speaking, these are people who have already been on adventures. They have already gone through their adventuring system. And if you take them at gosh, how do I put this? You take these people who used to be adventurers themselves and have already kind of surpassed that level, and as such they start the game with their own connections, their own allies, their own features and abilities, their own experiences, and things of that variety. And you go from there. You basically skip 3 levels ahead in D&D and have a bunch of stuff at your back to say, here's who I was before we came together as a party. Now let's go conquer whatever a continent is.
Yeah, that's interesting because most people skip those levels anyway, from what I hear.
Oh, if only.
Much to my exasperation, because as I said, I'm a Dungeon Crawl Classics fan, so I often enjoy just, being somebody who's going to be killed by just like a stray arrow.
Right. Well, hopefully the systems such as mine actually make sure that can happen at any level.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I feel like it's a fine balance. Like I think that in a lot of cases having it's just a balance of investment. If I'm going to quickly generate a character and like develop them conceptually while I play, it doesn't really matter to me if they die almost instantly. But if the game kind of demands that I put investment into creating the character on a conceptual level, then at that point, I might be a little bit more keen to say, well, I'd prefer for there to be maybe less likelihood that kind of thing is going to happen,
Yes.
Not that it shouldn't be possible, but just that it should be perhaps less numerically mathematically probable, I guess.
Your tactical decisions can alter those.
Yeah, and that's really the kind of mode of play that I enjoy, is when you are constantly evaluating the environment, the situation. You have to make tactical decisions, and this is
you also have to make strategic decisions.
Yes.
Can we take on this next fight? Mm-hmm. Can we go into this area and take on these fights and stuff like that? I find it so damn exhausting when every time we start a campaign, it's like, okay, every single place that we go to, we're just going to go, well, we hit a combat encounter. Well, let's just run over to the next combat encounter. Let's go to the next combat encounter. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, nobody died. Everybody's on the last hit points. Now we rest and we're back up to full. It's so exhausting because I have no expectations of whether or not it feels like I should not be able to do that. We just started a new campaign. I was encouraging our party to maybe pull back a bit. And we actually did, but not before one or two last combat encounters. And we actually got some cool stuff out of it. But people eventually did. It does appear that this is a campaign for once where if we screw up badly enough and make poor choices, we can die. Mm-hmm. We can get screwed over. As we were leaving the farm that we were engaging in these combats with, we ended up leaving, we look behind us and there's a Fey Lord who's collapsing it under vines and stuff like that. It's like, we're level 3. We're going back to the city. We're going back to the city. And I was so happy when everybody else agreed with me. I'm like, oh, cool. This will be that kind of campaign where we have to think about things, because otherwise, if you have games where everything is just, in order to simulate difficulty and danger, they just ramp up every combat to 11. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly just a matter of, it doesn't actually kill anybody. It just knocks people down to the last hit points about 10 times per fight. And characters get yo-yoed up and down with the various healing spells and abilities that you have.
Yes.
Right? It just makes every combat take like 10 times as long. And then even if people start to adjust their strategy a little bit, the second the GM eases up on the gas, they go right back. They go right back to just rushing into every single encounter that they can possibly find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they players don't really take telegraphs very well whenever you're running a game like that. Whenever you're trying to indicate, hey, this is really beyond your capabilities, or it should be, like without actually explicitly saying it, because I don't believe in explicitly saying that if you can help it. Then,
well, ideally the players are receiving information from their environment and hopefully are trying to eke out additional information from their environment. Mm-hmm. So that's not up to the GM. The GM is just reffing, right?
That's true. That's true.
if provided the system actually supports that and respects that mode of play.
Right, and assuming also that they make the choice to investigate, because that kind of tends to be the problem that comes up is, basically they'll get enough information to find out where the bad guy is, but that's it. They're like, oh, okay, let's go. We go there. They get there. And then it's a whole thing where you're gonna have like a 3-hour slugfest because they really weren't prepared for it, for all intents and purposes. And, it's just one of those things. Like I don't relish the idea of combat lasting very long in general. It's one of the reasons why I tend to appreciate, like kind of older editions to a degree. Because at the same time, the players aren't really doing as much damage in older editions, but I feel like it's the lack of the sophistication on the player's end as far as what actions they can use and all those kinds of things that combined with the lesser HP values and all that kind of stuff, that it just tends to flow faster. I've never had a very long fight in AD&D, for instance,
right.
Unless there's just a ton of enemies, just like a
right.
Well,
nobody who designs a new school RPG nowadays actually thinks to say, hey, what if I, across the course of adding all these features to the game and letting the players, giving them customization options, also made sure that didn't take 10 hours to resolve the big combat.
Yeah.
They just do, much as many of the old school designs are just first drafting low feature games, which are artificially lethal. Many of the new school games are just first drafting, what if I could just stack as many features into this game as possible, and not considering whether or not that might slow down the combat. Because I see it. They bought into this OSR lie of, oh, well, if you have low numbers of abilities, then it'll be a fast combat. And it's like, no. 5th edition has a low number of abilities. It's still nuked. Its combat still takes way too long. Mm-hmm. It's all these saving throws and resolution mechanics that screw up with it, and the decisions are tougher for players to make.
Oh, that actually brings me back to a point I forgot to bring up. Whenever you were talking about basically how casters, kind of got blasted a little bit with the concentration. They also, this is something I learned from playing other games. They also really got, they kind of got shafted whenever it comes to how many opportunities players get, or really characters in general, get to shake off things. Because, in like the older games, you cast web on somebody, and they fail their saving throw and they're stuck. Like that's pretty much it. And then you cast word of command, and it's like it's gonna last for a while. You turn somebody, like just durations tend to be a lot less forgiving in previous things, and I think that it kind of like it's taken a lot of the teeth out of actually using control spells in 5th edition, because there's so many opportunities to shake them.
Exactly.
But I don't know if that's just because they were just trying to. I do think I'm pretty sure why that was done. I think that's a safeguard for player fun, because that really seems to be the ultimate focus. Is they don't really seem to want to have players have to sit around and wait that often, if at all possible, or to be removed, have their options removed in any way. And I can kind of understand it almost whenever combat takes so fucking long,
Right. But like as we were just talking about, we don't need to take this is the year of our Lord, 2020. Whoops. 2020. I'm going to reset it all, people. You got to live through this again. No, I would never do that to any of you. Once was enough. Yeah. So my gosh. My gosh. Yeah, it's they can just keep, like, they don't have to do that. They can think about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And at some, because I know that they can think about these issues, I start suspecting them of just ignoring them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and attempting to force things on the players.
Yeah, and they went through quite a bit of playtesting. They had some contributions from old school minded people that I'm sure probably raised some of those concerns as well. But it just kind of seems like that's the direction they wanted to go. I know that you're kind of running out of time. You only got a few minutes until your next thing starts. So before you head out, I did want to ask, like, how far in development would you say you might be? Because it does sound like something.
Entering beta next month.
I'm sorry?
Entering beta next month, and awesome. I expect to see you in attendance for the West Marches game.
Oh yeah. If at all, I mean, if I can make it work, absolutely. Scheduling is always the thing. I would love to do that. I've always wanted to play in a West Marches game. And I actually was going to say that with the way you described it, it sounds like it's really a system that begs to be played with an open world approach.
Oh, it sounded like you cut out for a moment there. Are you good?
I was saying that it sounds like a game that it's kind of like begs to be played in like a sandbox kind of approach, or at least like a very player directed approach, rather than an adventure path or anything like that.
Right. Oh no, demands it. It's all module play. It's all things that adventures basically can't support beyond offering a context for a new catastrophe. Adventurers could not control the players and force them into given directions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's something.
It is designed to keep the GM as a ref.
Yes. I think that this is something that the more people come into the hobby, I think there's going to be more and more people like me who saw how people play 5th edition, which tends to follow the adventure path formula. They're going to be unsatisfied, and they're going to want to look for the other stuff. And I think that a game that supports the other stuff more is a really good idea. So I'm really excited about it.
Alrighty. All right, pal, you know that I have to head out.
Yes.
It was absolutely wonderful talking with you. This was a ton of fun.
Yes. I loved it.
I do enjoy a good rant or two.
Well, I'm sure there will be more rants in the future. I think it's just kind of goes with the territory of being passionate gamers,
Right.
All right, man.
Right.
Well,
all right, my man. I gotta head out. I'm getting pinged and spammed and all sorts of things.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by, man. It was awesome. And if y'all have any questions for him, you can shoot them on Twitter. I'll put that link in the description, and check out his blog, which is very good.
I appreciate that. All right, pal. Peace.
Take it out. Take it easy.